Now turning to the exercises for Chapter 5, we begin by writing out the Cal imperfect paradigm from memory for Catal. You should be able to say and write Yik tol, Tik tol, Tik tol again, because remember the third feminine singular and second masculine singular forms are identical. Then tik tali and ektol to complete the singular forms. Then in the plural, yik talu, tik tolna, tiktalu, tiktolna, and finally niktol. Exercise B then asks you to use the paradigm that you have learned to be able to take other verbs and create the various forms of the imperfect. So for instance, if you work with the verb malak, which glosses as to reign or rule, the third masculine singular would be yim lok, because I'm taking the prefix ye and the vowel. Then timlok for the third feminine singular and second masculine singular forms, again taking the prefix and the vowel. Then tim la ki, because I'm taking the ti prefix of the second feminine singular form, and then the vowel pattern in ending. And then the first common singular would be m lok, I will reign or rule. Then in the plural, we would have yim la hu, because again we take the prefix from the paradigm form, and in this case the ending. Then tim lok, with the accent there, na. Then tim lahu, matching the second masculine plural form, the same ending, the same beginning, and the same vowel pattern. Then tim lokna. And then finally, to make the first common plural form, we use the ni prefix. So nim lok. Do the same for the other forms to practice using the paradigm to take any particular three-letter root through all the various imperfect forms. With part C then, we now work on understanding forms of the verbs as they occur in the text, using your knowledge of the Cal paradigm for the imperfect. For example, we have yig dal. How would I parse this word? Well, right now, we only know Cal, so I would say Cal. And then I need to decide whether I have a perfect or imperfect. In this case, I look and I see ye at the beginning of the word, which I know is one of the prefixes that is common for an imperfect from my paradigm. So I would consider, unless something otherwise makes me change my mind, with ye as the first letter and syllable, that I have an imperfect. Now I need to figure out what type of imperfect. I look at the end of the word and there is nothing, no oo or ah or anything like that. So this matches the third masculine singular form of the paradigm, just like yik, tol. Then I simply need to identify the root letters. If I remove the y as being part of the paradigm, I'm left with 3 letters, and in fact I need a 3-letter root, so Gimel Dalet Lamed is my root. So the full parsing would then be a Cal imperfect, third masculine singular of Gadol, and then I would gloss it, which is a rough and ready translation, as he will be or become great. Do this for the rest of the parsing to practice parsing Hebrew verbs, both perfects and imperfects. Now in part D, we apply this skill to reading Hebrew clauses and phrases. As you approach a Hebrew clause, the first thing you should do is find the verb and understand that verb by parsing it. Then work from there to put the rest of the clause together. Numbers 22:18, with a slight alteration as there are forms in the actual verse that you do not yet know, reads as altered, Im yeten valak kesef v'zahav. The first thing to do is find the verb. I can find this verb in 2 ways. First, I recognize balak as a name and kesef v'zahav as 2 nouns paired with vav. And I recognize im as if from vocabulary, leaving yeten as the verb. Alternately, I could recognize this as a verb because it begins with ye, which I know from my Cal imperfect paradigms is a common beginning for imperfect verbs. Now I need to parse the verb. We only know Cal verbs at this state in our knowledge, and then I must decide, is it perfect or imperfect? Again, since it begins with ye as a syllable, Cal imperfect. Now I have to decide the rest of the parsing. I look at the end of the word and there are no additional letters from a paradigm that I would expect in the Cal imperfect. So I have a third masculine singular form. But now I have a problem. If I remove ye from the front, I simply have a tav and a nun as consonants. But I need to generate a 3-letter root to look this up in my lexicon. The hint is that the tav has a dagesh in it. Now tav is a bagad kafat letter, so technically this dagesh could be a lene or a forte. Remember that forte is the doubling dagesh. Which is it? Well, it follows the sound ye. The I is a vowel. So following a vowel, the tav as a bagad kafat letter could not take a lene dagesh. Therefore, the dagesh I have must be forte. It must be a doubling dagesh, that this word is said yit ten. Now I must explain, why is there this doubling dagesh? Why are there 2 t sounds in the word? And from this chapter, we remember that Natan has many times cases where the nun assimilates into the following tav, leaving behind a hint, evidence, in the form of the doubling dagesh. So this is a Cal imperfect, third masculine singular form of Natan, glossed as he will give. My next task in this clause is to figure out the subject. I have 3 nouns that follow the verb. Balak, the name Balak. Kesef, the word that's glossed as silver or money. And Zahav, the word glossed as gold. So I could either say silver and gold will give Balak, or much more sensically, Balak would be the subject. He will give, Balak will give, and then silver and gold are what he gives. I then simply have to add im, if, to the beginning of the clause, if Balak will give silver and gold. Work through the rest of the examples in exercise D to practice reading sentences or clauses that have both perfects and imperfects in them from the Hebrew text.